Innovation is happening at a pace we've never seen before. If you stop and think about companies that didn't even exist a decade ago, it includes things like Uber and Tesla, Airbnb. These companies didn't even exist a decade ago, and they've transformed our lives. So the question is this: are they done transforming our lives and we know like what we know about them and that's the best opportunity for each of those companies 10 years forward? Or will they continue to evolve and we have to adapt and change to take advantage of where they're going 10 years forward? And I think it's the latter. And in fact, what I want to do is talk about Airbnb and short-term rentals in specific and what I consider Airbnb version 2.0, what that might look like. So here's a quick history of Airbnb as I understand it. It's not factually checked, but it's directionally correct. A decade ago, people thought you were nuts if you would invite random strangers from all over the world to stay in your house. Or even crazier if you'd invite them to stay in your house while you were there. That's no longer crazy. That happens all over the world every single day, probably tens of thousands of times. That's the norm. Also, people thought that nobody would do this for a business. I mean, it was just a crazy concept that short-term rentals would replace long-term rentals and compete with hotels and so on and so forth. We know that that's not the case. And so what does that mean about the rate of adoption for short-term rentals? Is it changing the way that people live and the way that people travel and the way that people think about life and assets and renting assets? Yes, very much so. And so have we peaked? Are we at like peak Airbnb, or is there more room to grow? And I would say there's a lot more room to grow. As it relates to Uber, chances are there will be no more drivers. They will go driverless in the future, right? Like we understand that. That makes sense. We don't know the speed, but we know that's going to happen. What about Airbnb? What happens to Airbnb in the future? Well, my prediction and how I'm positioning myself to take advantage of what I think will happen is the days of monetizing an asset, like the room over your garage or the spare empty bedroom, or even the house itself, the days of a single family home and monetizing that on Airbnb, I think that that's commonplace. I think that that's a lot of competition. I think it's important now to stand out and to do things better and attract the right audience and know who you're speaking to and cater to them. We covered that in the last 250 videos. But what about the future? Well, for me, I think the future is creating something specifically for Airbnb, something that didn't exist. So to get granular and provide an example, let's just say that I wanted to have a single family home in Malibu, California, and assuming it's legal. I have no idea whether it's legal. I haven't researched the area, so please just do your own diligence. But just by way of example, I bet you that there's a lot of competition in Malibu, California on Airbnb and HomeAway and VRBO, and then it just becomes sort of who has better ratings and better testimonials, better feedback scores and so on, and then pricing. At a certain point, pricing rolls over and you start competing on price. So I wouldn't enter that. But I also bet you, and I know this because I looked, one of the most successful and profitable opportunities that I saw on Malibu Airbnb is an Airstream trailer on some canyon with a great view and a small deck. You can't replicate that. If somebody's looking for that, you're the only game in town. Now, there could be a second one at some point. There's probably more than 2 people looking for it. Maybe there's even 3 or 4, but there's not going to be 400 of them. But there are 400 single-family homes that could all be on Airbnb. And so like I've said time and time again, the riches are in the niches. Find something that's interesting to you personally. It could be bird watching, it could be fly fishing, it could be Airstreams, it could be camping, whatever it is. It could be basketball, it doesn't matter. Figure out what it is that you do well. Figure out what the experience is or the opportunity or how you can like bring that all together so that somebody who's really into that same experience will only select you and will ignore the 400 other competing offers because they just don't speak or resonate. It doesn't offer the experience they're looking for. That's where I think the opportunity is for Airbnb and short-term rentals going forward. So I remain really bullish on Airbnb and short-term rentals. In fact, I think it's the future. The future for all of us and for all housing and all travel and all experiences and everything else. It's really, really positive and it's continuing to grow. However, as an investor in the space and somebody who wants to monetize the opportunity, I personally am getting creative, and I would encourage you to do so as well. So what can you do that's unique, that's different, that adds value to the right people? Can you be a working farm? Can you have an organic produce stand? Can you have an alpaca farm like Mary Kay does? Can you have a tent, an Airstream? What can you do? How can you stand apart? How can you have no competition and have a green opportunity set in front of you instead of really crowded, lots of competition and price competition? That's the opportunity set. Figure it out, put comments below. Love to hear what you're doing. The more opportunities we share, I'm not competing with your situation in, South Africa. You're not competing with mine in the United States. Let's grow together.